Your jaw throbs. A dull ache spreads up into your ear, sharp with every heartbeat. You press your tongue against the swollen gum and wince. There is no ibuprofen in the shelter, no dentist's office down the road, no anesthetic drip waiting for you. For most of human history, this is exactly how a toothache played out. Not with a phone call, not with a scheduled appointment, just pain, and whatever your own hands and the landscape around you could offer. Here is the part that surprises most people. Dental disease itself is younger than you might think. For tens of thousands of years, most human groups actually had remarkably healthy teeth. Not perfect, not painless, but far better than what came later, once diets changed in a way nobody at the time could have predicted. The bioarchaeologist Clark Spencer Larson has spent decades studying skeletons from populations before and after they adopted farming, across continents and time periods. His research, and the work of many scientists who followed his lead, points to the same pattern again and again. When a population shifts from hunting and gathering to relying on cultivated grains, the rate of cavities climbs sharply. Sometimes it triples. Why? Starchy, sticky carbohydrates like wheat, barley, and maize feed the exact bacteria that eat away at enamel. Wild game, tubers, nuts, and foraged greens simply do not offer those bacteria the same buffet. Fewer cavities does not mean a pain-free mouth, though. Wear, breakage, and infection still happened. They just happened for different reasons. So did your ancestors ever get a toothache? Absolutely. It happened. And when it did, they dealt with it in ways that would make a modern dentist a little uneasy, and honestly, a little impressed. Let's start in northern Italy, at a site called Riparo Fredian. In 2017, a research team led by Stefano Benazzi examined a molar roughly 13,000 years old under high magnification. What they found was startling. The cavity had been deliberately scraped clean with a small, sharp stone tool, and the hollow left behind showed traces consistent with a packing material, likely including bitumen and possibly plant or hair fibers pressed into the space. It is, as far as researchers currently know, one of the oldest examples of something resembling a dental filling. Someone, thousands of years before metal tools existed, sat still while another person dug into their tooth with a sliver of flint and then packed the hole to protect it. Now travel east, to Mehrgarh, in what is now Pakistan. Alfredo Coppa and his colleagues studied a set of molars there, dated to roughly 9,000 years ago, and found something that is even harder to picture calmly. 9 teeth showed small, precise, cylindrical holes drilled straight into them. The most likely tool was a bow drill, essentially the same device used at the time to bore holes in beads for jewelry, simply repurposed for a far more painful job. There is no evidence of anything resembling anesthesia. There is only the hole, and the person who once had to sit through it being made, probably held still by someone else. This is the detail that gets me every time. We tend to imagine prehistoric medicine as pure guesswork, superstition with no logic behind it. But drilling into an infected tooth to relieve built-up pressure is, mechanically, close to the same idea a modern root canal follows. The tools were stone instead of steel. The reasoning behind them was not nearly as different as you might assume. Then there is El Cidrón Cave in northern Spain, and this case pushes the story back even further. Before our species existed as the only humans on the landscape, Karen Hardy and her colleagues analyzed hardened dental plaque, called calculus, preserved on the teeth of Neanderthal individuals who lived there around 49,000 years ago. Inside that ancien plaque, they detected chemical traces consistent with poplar bark, which contains a compound closely related to the active ingredient in aspirin. They also found evidence of a mold related to the one that naturally produces penicillin. The individual in question appears to have had a dental abscess and possibly a digestive parasite as well. Researchers are genuinely split on how far to take this. It is difficult to prove intention from chemical residue alone, and some scientists caution that plant compounds could enter dental calculus through ordinary diet rather than deliberate treatment. But the specific combination found here, a sick individual, a pain-relieving plant, and a mold with antimicrobial properties, is hard to write off as coincidence. If Hardy's interpretation holds, it suggests Neanderthals were not simply enduring illness, the way popular stereotypes still like to imagine them. They may have been actively treating it. There is a smaller, stranger clue that shows up across many ancient populations, including Neanderthal sites. Tiny grooves worn into the sides of teeth, between the molars, from repeated scraping with something thin, most likely a grass stem, a bone splinter, or a similar tool. Anthropologists studying these interproximal grooves generally interpret them as evidence of habitual toothpick use, a small, unglamorous act of hygiene repeated so many times over a lifetime that it left a permanent groove in the enamel. It is easy to picture your ancestors as purely reactive, only dealing with pain once it arrived. These grooves suggest something closer to routine maintenance, an attempt to keep the pain from starting at all. The dental anthropologist John Lukács has spent much of his career comparing tooth decay rates across foraging societies worldwide, and one of his more striking findings involves sex differences. In several populations he studied, women show slightly higher rates of cavities than men from the same group. His proposed explanation is not biological at all. It is dietary. In many foraging societies, women more often processed and sampled gathered plant foods throughout the day, tasting and testing as they worked, while men's diets leaned more heavily toward meat from the hunt. A small difference in daily behavior, repeated across a lifetime, left a measurable difference behind in the teeth themselves. One more reminder that ancient health was shaped by the specifics of daily labor, not by some uniform caveman diet that applied equally to everyone. It is worth pausing on just how dangerous a bad tooth could actually become. An abscess is not simply painful. It is an infection, and left untreated, that infection can spread into the jaw, into the bloodstream, into the sinuses near the brain. Long before antibiotics existed in any form, a severe dental infection was a real, sometimes fatal threat, not a minor inconvenience. This is part of why the evidence for intervention, drilling, scraping, packing, medicating, matters so much. It was not decoration or ritual for its own sake. In many cases, it may have been the difference between a person recovering and a person dying of something that today gets treated with a 10-day course of pills. So let's reconstruct a night, somewhere in Ice Age Europe, roughly 50,000 years ago. You are sitting close to a fire because the cold outside is the kind that gets into your bones. Your face aches on one side, worse when the wind hits it, worse still when you try to chew. You have not eaten properly in 2 days, because chewing on that side sends a bolt of pain up into your temple, and swallowing without chewing only gets you so far. Someone beside you, maybe an elder who has treated this kind of pain before, strips bark from a nearby tree and has you hold a piece of it against the tooth, or chew it slowly at the back of your jaw where it hurts least. It will not cure the infection sitting under your gum. It might dull the sharpest edge of the pain enough that you can finally sleep for more than an hour at a stretch. There is no promise that you will wake up better. There is only this: the fire, the bark, the low voices around you, and the people who know a little more than you do about what helps, doing what they can with what the land provides. Someone else keeps the fire fed. Someone else takes over your share of the work for the night, without needing to be asked. That, as much as the bark itself, is part of the treatment. Here is the twist. And it is the kind of twist that quietly upends the story we usually tell about progress. Farming is often framed as the great leap forward for humanity, the moment life got easier and more predictable. For your teeth, it was closer to the opposite. Skeletal surveys across dozens of agricultural transitions, from ancient Mesoamerica to the Nile Valley to prehistoric Europe, show the same signature over and over. Once grain became the backbone of the diet, cavities spiked, jaw abscesses became more common, and tooth loss at a young age went from rare to expected. Farming brought a steadier food supply and allowed populations to grow far larger than foraging bands ever could. It also brought a mouthful of new problems that hunting and gathering had rarely produced in the first place. That trade-off has not disappeared. It has just changed shape. Refined sugar is now everywhere, in quantities that would make even a grain-heavy farmer's diet look mild by comparison, and cavities remain one of the most common chronic conditions on the entire planet, affecting billions of people at some point in their lives. What has genuinely changed is what happens after the pain starts. You do not need a bow drill or a strip of poplar bark. or someone holding you still by the fire. You need an appointment, a local anesthetic, and about an hour of your afternoon. The ache your ancestors treated with plants and sharpened stone, the same primal dread that may have sent a Neanderthal reaching for bark 49,000 years ago, is something you can usually resolve before lunch and barely think about again. It is easy to take that for granted, right up until you are sitting in a waiting room, irritated about being 20 minutes behind schedule. Compare that irritation to a bow drill pressed against an aching molar with nothing to numb the pain, and the modern version of a bad tooth starts to look less like a hardship and more like a strange kind of privilege, one so ordinary that it rarely gets treated as one. The underlying biology has not changed much at all. Your enamel, your nerve endings, the way an infection builds pressure under a swollen gum, all of that is close to what a Neanderthal or a Mergar farmer would have experienced. What changed is everything wrapped around the pain, the tools, the knowledge, the odds of walking away from it unharmed. But the fear itself is old, older than agriculture, older than pottery, quite possibly older than our own species. It was already sitting in a cave in northern Spain, tens of thousands of years before anyone learned to write a single word of it down, carried by a species that was not even Homo sapiens, and passed down anyway, encoded not in genes, but in the simple, universal fact of having a body that can hurt and a mind that looks for a way to make it stop. None of this means your ancestors were fragile, or that they suffered constantly, or that life before dentistry was one long toothache. Most people, most of the time, chewed, ate, and got on with their lives without incident. But when something did go wrong, the response was rarely passive. Scrape the cavity clean, drill the hole, chew the bark, pass the tool to the next person who might need it. It is a thread that runs from a cave in Spain, to a workshop in Mergar, to a rock shelter in Italy, to whatever dental office you last sat in, half numb, scrolling on your phone, while a hygienist worked around your jaw. Your jaw still throbs sometimes. But now, when it does, you are not alone with a piece of bark and a dying fire. You are the far end of a very long line of people who refused to simply sit with the pain and did something about it. However crude the tools, however uncertain the outcome, that instinct, the reaching for something, anything, that might help, is the real inheritance passed down to you, not the ache itself, the refusal to just endure it.